Hello everyone, well, members and people on the podcast. Welcome back to Joan of Arc. France begins to live again. That's what we're on right now. Remember, she's just taken Patay, the full siege. Joan had said true. France was on its way to be free. The war called the 100 Years' War was very sick today. Sick on its English side for the very first time since its birth. 91 years gone by. Shall we judge battles by the numbers killed and the ruin wrought, or shall we not rather judge them by the results which followed from them? Anyone will say that a battle is only truly great or small according to its results. Yes, anyone will grant that, for it is the truth. Judged by results, Patay's place is with the few supremely great and imposing battles that have been fought since the peoples of the world first resorted to arms for the settlement of their quarrels. So judged, it is even possible that Patay has no peer among that few just mentioned, but stand alone as the supremest of historic conflicts. For when it began, France lay gasping out the remnant of an exhausted life, her case wholly hopeless in the view of all political physicians. When it ended, 3 hours later, she was convalescent and nothing requisite but time and ordinary nursing to bring her back to perfect health. The dullest physician of them all could see this, and there was none to deny it. Many death-sick nations have reached convalescence through a series of battles, a procession of battles, a weary tale of wasting conflict stretching over years, but only one has reached it in a single day and by a single battle. That nation is France. That battle is Patay. Remember it and be proud of it, for you are French, and it is the stateliest fact in the long annals of your country. There it stands, with its head in the clouds, and when you grow up you will go on pilgrimage to the field of Patay and stand uncovered in the presence of what? A monument with its head in the clouds. Yes, for all nations in all times have built monuments on the battlefields to keep green the memory of the perishable deed that was wrought there, and of the perishable name of him who wrought it. And will France neglect Patay and Joan of Arc? Not for long. And will she build a monument scale to their rank as compared with the world's other fields and heroes? Perhaps if there be room for it under the arch of the sky. But let us not go back a little and consider certain strange and impressive facts. The 100 Years' War began in 1337. It raged on, year after year and year after year, and at last England stretched through France prone with that fearful blow at Crécy. But she rose and struggled on, year after year, and at last again she went down under another devastating blow, Poitiers. She gathered her crippled strength once more, and the war raged on, and still on, year after year, decade after decade. Children were born, grew up, married, died. The war raged on. Their children turned into grown-up, married, died. The war raged on. Their children, growing, saw France struck down again, this time under the incredible disaster of Agincourt, and still the war raged on, year after year. And in this time these children married in their turn. France was a wreck, a ruin, a desolation. The half of it belonged to England, with none to dispute or deny the truth. The other half belonged to nobody in 3 months, and that would be flying the English flag soon. The French king was making ready to throw away his crown and flee beyond the seas. Now came the ignorant country maid out of the remote village and confronted this hoary war, this all-consuming conflagration that had swept the land for 3 generations. Then began the briefest and most amazing campaign that is recorded in history. In 7 weeks it was finished. In 7 weeks she hopelessly crippled the gigantic war that was 91 years old. At Orleans she struck it a staggering blow, and on the field of Bataille she broke its back. Think of it. Yes. One day, would you understand it? That is another matter. None will ever be able to comprehend that stupefying marvel. 7 weeks, with her, and there a little bloodshed, perhaps the most of it in any single fight, at Patay, where the English began 6,000 strong and left 2,000 dead upon its field. It is said and believed that in 3 battles alone, Crécy, Poitiers, and Agincourt near, 100,000 Frenchmen fell, without counting the 1,000 other fights of the long war. The dead of that war make a mournful long list, an interminable list of men slain in the field. The count goes by tens of thousands, of innocent women and children slain by bitter hardship and hunger. It goes by that appalling term, millions. It was an ogre, that war, an ogre that went on for those 100 years, crunching men, dripping blood from its jaws, and with a little hand, the child of 17 struck him down, and yonder he lies stretched on the field of Patay, and will not get up any more while this old world lasts. The great news of Patay was carried over the whole of France in 20 hours, people said. I do not know it as that, but one thing is sure. Anyway, the moment a man got it, he flew shouting and glorifying God, and told his neighbour, and the neighbour flew with it to the next homestead, and so on and so forth, without resting the word travelled. And when a man got it in the night, at whatever hour, he jumped out of his bed and bore the blessed message along. And the joy that went with it was like the light that flows across the land when an eclipse is receding from the face of the sun. And indeed, you may say that France had lain in an eclipse this long time, yes, buried in black gloom, which these beneficent tidings were sweeping away now, before the onrush of their white splendour. The news beat the flying enemy to Yeovil. The town rose against its English masters and shut the gates against their brethren. It flew to Montpellier, to Saint-Simon, and to this, that, and the other English fortress, and straightway the garrison applied the torch and took to the fields and the woods. A detachment of our army occupied Meung and pillaged it. When we reached Orleans, that tour was as much as 50 times insaner with joy than we had ever seen it before, which is saying much. Night had just fallen, and the illuminations were so wonderful, a scale that we seemed to plough through seas of fire. And as to the noise, the hoarse cheering of the multitude, the thundering of cannon, the clash of bells indeed, there was never anything like it. And everywhere rose a new cry that burst upon us like a storm when the column entered the gates, and never more ceased. Welcome, Joan of Arc. Welcome to Joan of Arc way for the saviour of France. And there was another cry. Crécy is avenged. Poitiers is avenged. Agincourt is avenged. Patay shall live forever. Mad? Why, you never could imagine it in the world. The prisoners were in the centre of the column. When that came along, the people caught sight of the masterful old enemy Talbot. That had made them dance so long to his grim war music, you may imagine what the uproar was like if you can, for I cannot describe it. They were so glad to see him that presently they wanted to have him out and hang him, so Joan had him brought up to the front to ride in her protection. They made a striking pair. Joan protected this man? She protected him? Oh, my lord. Joan's 5 great deeds. So yes, Orleans was in delirium of felicity. She invited the king and made sumptuous preparations to receive him, but he didn't come. He was simply a serf at that time, and Ledromel was his master. Master and serf were visiting together at the master's castle of Sully-sur-Loire. At Beaugency, Joan had engaged to bring about a reconciliation between the Constable Richmond and the king. She took Richmond to Sully-sur-Loire and made a promise good. The great deeds of Joan of Arc are 5. The raising of the siege, the victory of Patay, the reconciliation at Sully-sur-Loire, the coronation of the king, the bloodless march. We shall come to the bloodless march later, and the coronation. It was the victorious long march which Joan made through the enemy's country from Gien to Reims, and thence to the gates of Paris, capturing every English town and fortress that barred the road, from the beginning of the journey to the end of it, and this by the mere force of her name, and without shedding a drop of blood. Perhaps the most extraordinary campaign in this regard in history. This is the most glorious of her military exploits. The reconciliation was one of Joan's most important achievements. No one else could have accomplished it, and, in fact, no one else of high consequence had any disposition to try. In brains, in scientific warfare, and in statesmanship, the Constable Richmond was the ablest man in France. His loyalty was sincere, his probity was above suspicion, and it made him sufficiently conspicuous in that trivial and conscienceless court. In restoring Richmond to France, Joan made thoroughly secure the successful completion of the great work which she had begun. She had never seen Richmond until he came to her with his little army. Was it not wonderful that at a glance she should know him for the one man who could finish and perfect her work and establish it, perpetuity? How was it that that child was able to do this? It was because she had the seeing eye. As one of our knights had once said, she had the great gift, almost the highest and rarest that has been granted to man. Nothing of an extraordinary sort was still to be done, yet the remaining work could not safely be left to the king's idiots, for it would require wise statesmanship and long and patient, though desultory hammering of the enemy. Now and then, for a quarter of a century yet, there would be little fighting to do, and a handyman could carry that with a small disturbance to the rest of the country. And little by little, and with progressive certainty, the English would disappear from France. And that happened. Under the influence of Richmond, the king became at a later time a king, a brave and capable and determined soldier. Within 6 years after Patay, he was leading storming parties himself, fighting in fortress ditches up to his waist in water and climbing scaling ladders under a furious fire, with a pluck that would have satisfied even Joan of Arc. In time, he and Richmond cleared away all the English, even from regions where the people had been under their mastership for 300 years. In such regions, wise and careful work was necessary, for the English rule had been fair and kindly, and men who have been ruled in that way are not always anxious for change. Which of Joan's 5 chief deeds shall we call the chiefest? It is my thought that each in its own turn was that. That saying that, taken a whole, they equalized each other, and neither was the greater than its mate. Do you perceive? Each was a stage in an ascent. To leave out one of them would defeat the journey. To achieve one of them at the wrong time and in the wrong place would have the same effect. Consider the coronation, a masterpiece of diplomacy. Where can you find it superior in our history? Did the king suspect its vast importance? No. Did his ministers? No. Did the astute Bedford, representative of English crown? No. An advantage of incalculable importance was here under the eyes of the king and of Bedford. The king could get it by a bold stroke. Bedford could get it without an effort, but, being ignorant of its value, neither of them put forth in his hand. Of all the wise people in the high office in France, only one knew the priceless worth of this neglected prize, the untaught child of 17, Joan of Arc, and she had known it from the beginning as an essential detail of her mission. How did she know it? It was simple. She was a peasant. That tells the whole story. She was of the people and knew the people. Those others moved in loftier sphere and knew nothing about them. We make little account of that vague, formless, inert mass, that mighty underlying force which we call the people, an epithet, which carries contempt with it. It is a strange attitude, for at bottom we know that the throne which the people support stands, and that when the support is removed, nothing in this world can save it. Now, consider the fact and observe its importance. Whatever the parish priest believes his flock believes, they love him, they revere him. He is their unfailing friend, their dauntless protector, their comforter in sorrow, their helper in the day of need. He has their whole confidence. What he tells them to do, that they will do, with a blind and affectionate obedience, let it cost what it may. And these facts thoughtfully together, and what is the sum? This: the parish priest governs the nation. What is the king then? If the parish priest withdraws his support and denies authority, merely a shadow and no king, let him resign. Do you get the idea? Then let us proceed. A priest is consecrated to his office by the awful hand of God, laid upon him by his appointed representative on earth. That consecration is final. Nothing can undo it. Nothing can remove it. Neither the Pope nor any other power can strip the priest of his office. God gave it, and it is forever sacred and secure. The dull parish knows all this. The priest and parish, whatsoever is anointed of God, bears an office whose authority can no longer be disputed or assailed. To the parish priest and to his subjects, the nation, an uncrowned king, is a similitude of a person who has been named for holy orders but not been consecrated, or has no office. He has not been ordained. Another may be appointed to his place. In a word, an uncrowned king is a doubtful king. But if God appoint him, and his servant, the bishop, anoint him, the doubt is annihilated. The priest and his parish are his loyal subjects straight away, and while he lives, they will recognize no king but him. The Joan of Arc, the peasant girl. Charles VII was no king until he was crowned. To her, he was only the Dauphin, that is to say, the heir. If I have ever made her call him king, it was a mistake. She called him the Dauphin, and nothing else until after the coronation. It shows you, as in the mirror for Joan was a mirror in which the lowly hosts of France were clearing reflected, that all that vast underlying force called the people, he was no king but only Dauphin, because before his crowning, and was indisputably and irrevocably king after it. Now you understand what a colossal move on the political chessboard the coronation was. Bedford realised this by and by, and tried to patch up his mistake by crowning his king. But what good could that do? None in the world. Speaking of chess, Joan's great acts may be likened to that game. Each move was made in its proper order, and it has a great and effective purpose because it was made in its proper order and not out of it. Each at the time made seemed the greatest move, but the final result made them all recognizable, or equally essential and equally important. This is the game as played. Joan moves to Orleans, empathy, check. Then moves to reconciliation, but does not proclaim check, it being a move for position and to take effect later. Next, she moves the coronation, check. Next, the bloodless march, check. Final move, and this unfortunately was after her death, the reconciled Constable Richmond to the French king's elbow, check, mate. And that's the end of that part of Joan of Arc. When we come back, we're going to get into the Burgundians. How nice. Thank you for listening, and many blessings.